Welcome to Beyond Borders, where we dig beneath the surface to show you what countries are actually like when the tour buses leave. Today, we're exploring Vietnam, a nation that's managed to completely reinvent itself while somehow staying true to traditions that go back thousands of years. You've probably seen the Instagram shots of lantern-lit streets in Hoi An or the limestone karsts of Ha Long Bay. But the Vietnam that actually exists, it's stranger, more complex, and far more fascinating than any travel brochure will ever tell you. Number 7. The sidewalk economy that runs everything. Let me start with something that'll completely change how you see this country: the sidewalk. In most places around the world, sidewalks are just the thing between the street and buildings, a path to get from point A to point B. In Vietnam, sidewalks are the economy. They're restaurants, barbershops, repair shops, living rooms, and social clubs all rolled into one. Walk down any street in Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City and you'll see what I mean. There's a woman cooking pho over a portable gas burner. Next to her, someone's getting a haircut on a plastic stool. 2 meters away, a guy's repairing motorbikes. Behind him, a group of middle-aged men are drinking iced coffee while playing Chinese chess. And somehow, in the remaining 30 centimeters of sidewalk, motorbikes are parking and pedestrians are squeezing through. This isn't chaos. This is a highly organized, informal economy that employs millions of people and generates billions in revenue. The Vietnamese government has tried multiple times to clean up sidewalks and move vendors indoors, but these campaigns always fail. Why? Because sidewalk commerce is too essential. For a family running a pho stand, rent on a proper storefront might eat 60 to 70% of their profit. On the sidewalk, they might pay a small, unofficial fee to the local ward, but their margins stay healthy. Here's what makes this genuinely fascinating. There are unwritten rules that govern who sets up where. Families have claimed certain spots for generations. If you set up your coffee stand in the wrong location, you'll get a visit from whoever's been there for 20 years. Disputes are settled through neighborhood committees, not courts. It's an entire parallel legal system that foreigners never see. The food quality on these sidewalks is often better than restaurants. I'm serious. That grandmother who's been making bún chả in the same spot for 40 years, she's not competing on ambiance, she's competing purely on taste. If her food wasn't excellent, she'd have been pushed out decades ago. Meanwhile, restaurants with high rent have to cut corners somewhere. When you eat on a Vietnamese sidewalk, you're participating in an economic and social system that's been refined over centuries. Those tiny plastic chairs that seem ridiculous to Western visitors, they're designed that way intentionally. They're cheap to replace, easy to stack and move when police do occasional sweeps, and they keep customers close to the ground where the food is being prepared. Every element has evolved for a reason. Comment 1 if you've ever eaten street food in Vietnam and had your mind blown by how good it was. Number 6. The coffee obsession that makes Starbucks look boring. Now let's talk about something Vietnam does better than almost anywhere else on earth: coffee. And I don't mean Vietnam produces good coffee beans, although they do. They're the second largest coffee producer in the world after Brazil. I mean, Vietnamese coffee culture is on another level that most Westerners can't even comprehend. First, forget everything you know about how coffee should taste. Vietnamese coffee is strong, brutally strong. They primarily grow robusta beans rather than Arabica you find in most specialty coffee shops. Robusta has nearly twice the caffeine content and a much more intense, almost bitter flavor. Then they roast it dark, sometimes adding butter during the roasting process to create this thick, almost chocolatey quality. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of trying to mellow out this intense flavor, they lean into it. The most common preparation is café sữa đá, which is coffee with sweetened condensed milk over ice. You'd think sugar and condensed milk would make it sickly sweet, and it can be, but somehow the intensity of the coffee balances it. The result is this incredibly bold, creamy, sweet drink that's nothing like anything you'll get at Starbucks. Now, let me tell you about egg coffee, which sounds disgusting, but is actually brilliant. In 1946, a bartender in Hanoi named Nguyen Van Giang was dealing with a milk shortage. Fresh milk was expensive and hard to find, so he experimented with whisking egg yolks with sugar and condensed milk until they became thick and creamy, then floating this mixture on top of strong black coffee. The result was café chuông, egg coffee, which has the texture of a liquefied tiramisu. The coffee shop he opened, Café Giang, is still operating today. His son runs it now. It's in a cramped alley in the old quarter, and tourists line up every day. But here's what matters. This wasn't invented as a tourist gimmick. It was a creative solution to scarcity that became a genuine tradition. Vietnamese people drink coffee constantly, but not the way Americans do. You won't see people rushing through their morning with a to-go cup. Coffee time is social time. People sit, they talk, they watch the street. Coffee shops are where business deals happen, where friends catch up, where students study for hours. The coffee itself is almost secondary to the ritual of stopping, sitting, and being present. The sidewalk coffee shops are the democratic version of this. You'll see construction workers in dusty clothes sitting next to businessmen in suits. Everyone on the same tiny plastic stools, everyone paying the same 15,000 dong for their iced coffee. About 60 cents. If you've watched this far, please subscribe to Beyond Borders because we've got so much more to cover, and the next points get into things most travel videos completely ignore. Number 5. The language barrier nobody warns you about. Let's talk about Vietnamese, a language that will humble you faster than you could imagine. Most travel content glosses over this by saying Vietnamese is tonal, so it's hard, and then moves on.
I speak much better Korean than Vietnamese. Vietnamese is really difficult.
That's like saying climbing Everest is steep, so bring good shoes. The reality is more extreme. Vietnamese has 6 distinct tones. This means the same syllable, pronounced with 6 different pitch patterns, becomes 6 different words.
Hôm nay mình sẽ dẫn bạn đi cà phê với mình nha.
The word ma can mean ghost, mother, horse, rice seedling, tomb, or butt, depending entirely on how you say it. Get the tone wrong, and you're not just speaking with an accent, you're literally saying a different word. Vietnamese people will smile politely and try to figure out what you meant, but internally, they're completely confused. Now multiply this across every single word in the language. And add the fact that Vietnamese has sounds that don't exist in English. There are consonants produced in the back of the throat that English speakers physically don't know how to make.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
There are vowels with sounds we don't distinguish. Most foreigners who live in Vietnam for years never become fluent. They learn enough to order food, give taxi directions, and handle basic transactions. Beyond that, they rely on Vietnamese friends, translators, or the growing number of Vietnamese people who speak English. But here's the flip side. Vietnamese people are incredibly patient with language learners. They're used to foreigners butchering their language, and they're genuinely delighted when you try. Even basic phrases like cảm ơn for thank you or xin lỗi for sorry will earn you huge smiles. Making an effort matters far more than getting it perfect. The practical reality for travelers, you don't need to speak Vietnamese to enjoy Vietnam. In tourist areas, English is common enough. Google Translate works surprisingly well for written text, and Vietnamese people are masters at communicating through gestures, pointing, and creative problem solving. Comment 4 if you've ever moved somewhere cheap and discovered the budget doesn't match reality. Number 4, the real cost of cheap living. Every travel video about Vietnam mentions how cheap it is. $500 a month, $800 a month. You could live like a king. And these numbers aren't wrong exactly, but they paint an incomplete picture that leads to some brutal reality checks for people who actually move here. Yes, you can rent a decent one-bedroom apartment in a major Vietnamese city for $300 to $400 monthly. You can eat amazing street food for $1 to $3 per meal. A motorbike rental is $50 a month. On paper, you could survive on $600 to $800 monthly if you lived extremely frugally. But here's what those budgets leave out. You're not going to live like that. The $300 apartments are in neighborhoods with no foreigner infrastructure, signs only in Vietnamese, and landlords who don't speak English. The moment you want an apartment with reliable hot water, air conditioning that works, and a landlord who can communicate about repairs, you're looking at $500 to $700 minimum. That $1 street food, it's amazing, but after a few months, you'll want variety. You'll want the occasional Western meal, sushi, a real pizza. Those cost $15 to $25. You'll want to go to a rooftop bar with friends. You'll want to take weekend trips. The lifestyle most expats actually live costs $1,200 to $1,800 monthly in Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi. Still cheap from Western standards, but not the extreme budget living people imagine. Healthcare is where things get complicated. Basic medical care is inexpensive. Yes, a doctor's visit might cost $20 to $50 at a local clinic. But if you need serious care, if you need hospitalization, if you need surgery, you probably don't want it at the cheapest option. International hospitals with English-speaking doctors and Western standards cost Western prices. A medical evacuation to Singapore or Thailand, which is what serious expat insurance covers, runs tens of thousands of dollars. What Vietnam actually offers is this: a better quality of life for the same money you'd spend struggling in a major Western city. The young professional who earns $2,000 remotely and can barely afford a studio in San Francisco can rent a nice one-bedroom with a pool, eat out every night, take weekend trips, and save money in Vietnam. That's real. But live like a king on $500 a month is Instagram fiction.
Number 3. The motorbike chaos that actually works. If you've seen any video about Vietnam, you've seen the traffic. Millions of motorbikes flowing through intersections in what looks like complete anarchy. Tourists describe it as terrifying. They post videos saying, "I can't believe anyone survives this." And from the outside, especially at a major Hanoi intersection at rush hour, it does look insane. But here's what nobody explains. The system works. Vietnam has a traffic fatality rate, and it's not great for European standards, but it's far lower than you'd expect given the apparent chaos. How? Because what looks like chaos is actually a highly sophisticated collective system that everyone understands. The fundamental principle is flow, not rules. In Western driving culture, we think about traffic as follows. There are rules, everyone follows them, and the system functions because everyone stays in their lane, stops at signals, and proceeds in order. Vietnamese traffic operates on an entirely different principle. Everyone is constantly moving, constantly adjusting, and collisions are avoided through continuous micro-negotiations between drivers. When you cross a busy intersection on a motorbike in Vietnam, you're not stopping and starting. You're threading through moving vehicles while making eye contact, adjusting your speed, reading body language, and trusting that other drivers are doing the same thing. The rule is that you maintain predictable motion. You don't suddenly stop. You don't suddenly accelerate. You move at a steady pace and trust the flow. For pedestrians, this is terrifying at first. You stand at a corner, watch the endless stream of motorbikes, or wait for a gap that never comes. The secret? Just walk. Slowly, steadily, predictably. The bikes will flow around you. They're watching, they're adjusting. The worst thing you can do is hesitate, stop, or run. That creates unpredictability, which is the only thing that breaks the system. There are actual traffic laws in Vietnam. Red lights exist. Traffic police stand at major intersections. But enforcement is selective and often negotiable. The real regulation comes from the collective understanding of flow. Experienced drivers can navigate rush hour without ever touching their brakes, just throttle adjustments and constant awareness. For visitors, here's the practical advice. If you've never ridden a motorbike, do not start in Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City. Go to a smaller city or town, get comfortable with the bike itself, and then gradually work up to heavier traffic. Or just use Grab, Vietnam's rail-hailing app, and let an experienced driver handle it. Number 2. The hidden hierarchy of Vietnamese society. Something tourists never see, but expats eventually learn. Vietnam has one of the most complex social hierarchies in Asia, and it governs almost every interaction without anyone explicitly explaining it. The core concept is based on age and relationship. Vietnamese has different words for you and I depending on who you're talking to. This isn't like Spanish with tu versus usted. This is an entire system of pronouns that changes based on your relative age, family relationship, and social position compared to the person you're speaking with. Get it wrong, and you've either insulted someone by being too familiar or created awkward distance by being too formal. Vietnamese people, when they meet someone new, one of the first questions is often about age. This isn't considered rude. It's necessary information for knowing how to address each other properly. The older person gets linguistic respect. They're addressed with pronouns that acknowledge their seniority. The younger person takes a differential position, and this shapes the entire interaction. Within families, this hierarchy is absolute. Elder siblings have authority over younger ones. Parents have authority over children regardless of age. Grandparents sit at the top. Family decisions flow through this structure. A 40-year-old successful businessman still defers to his 65-year-old mother in family matters. Her word on family issues carries more weight than his professional achievements. This extends into business and social life. In meetings, the most senior person often speaks first or last. Junior employees don't contradict senior ones publicly. Negotiations factor in face saving for all parties, especially senior ones. Foreign business people who don't understand this make embarrassing mistakes constantly. For tourists, here's what this means practically. Showing respects to older people goes a long way. A slight bow, a two-handed shando with someone elderly, letting older people enter doorways first. These small gestures are noticed and appreciated. Conversely, being overly casual or treating service workers dismissively is seen as revealing poor character. The hierarchy doesn't mean Vietnamese society is rigid or unwelcoming. It means there are layers you need to understand to really connect. Once you're accepted into a social circle, the warmth is genuine, but that acceptance comes partly from demonstrating you understand how things work. Number 1. The resilience that defines everything. Finally, we need to talk about something that underlies everything else about Vietnam. The resilience that's baked into the national identity. This isn't something you'll see in tourist photos, but it explains almost everything about how Vietnamese people approach life. Vietnam spent most of the 20th century at war. Chinese occupation for centuries before that, French colonialism, Japanese occupation, the American War, the Cambodian conflict, border wars with China. Within living memory, this country experienced some of the most devastating warfare imaginable, including massive bombing campaigns, chemical weapons, and millions of casualties. Entire regions were destroyed multiple times. And yet, walk through Hanoi today, and you'll see a city vibrant with commerce, culture, and optimism. Ho Chi Minh City is one of the fastest-growing economies in Southeast Asia. Vietnamese students outperform American and British students in international math and science assessments. Vietnamese entrepreneurs are building tech companies that compete globally. Life expectancy has jumped from 40 years in the 1950s to over 75 today. This isn't despite the traumatic history, it's shaped by it. Vietnamese culture has developed a practical, forward-looking orientation that foreigners find surprising. There's remarkably little public animosity towards Americans, despite everything. When asked about this, Vietnamese people often say something like, "The war is finished. What good does anger do? We need to build the future." This pragmatism shows up everywhere, in the entrepreneurial hustle that makes sidewalk vendors work 14-hour days, in the focus on education that drives parents to sacrifice for children's schooling, in the adaptability that allowed a communist country to embrace market economics without the political upheaval that destroyed the Soviet bloc. When you interact with Vietnamese people and wonder at their work ethic, their hospitality, their determination to improve their circumstances, you're seeing the fruits of a culture that has learned to rebuild over and over again, not by dwelling on what was lost, but by focusing on what can be created. This is what makes Vietnam more than a cheap destination with good food. It's a living lesson in human resilience, wrapped in a country that's simultaneously ancient and completely modern. Before we close, here's what you actually need to know for planning a trip. Visa. U.S. citizens can apply for an e-visa online for about $25, valid for 30 days single entry. The process takes 3 to 5 business days. For longer stays or multiple entries, apply through a Vietnamese consulate or use a visa agent. Best time to visit. The country spans many climate zones. Central Vietnam, Da Nang, Hoi An, is best from February to May. The north has pleasant weather from October to December. The south is good all year round, but hottest March to May. Money. The currency is the dong. ATMs are everywhere in cities. Credit cards are accepted at hotels and nicer restaurants, but cash is still king for street food, markets, and small shops. Don't be alarmed by the zeros. 1 million dong is about $40. Getting around. Domestic flights are cheap and plentiful. Sleeper buses connect major cities but aren't for the claustrophobic. Trains are comfortable for some routes, especially Hanoi to Hue. Within cities, Grab is essential. Just download the app before you arrive. Health. Tap water is not safe to drink. Bottled water is cheap and available everywhere. Street food is generally safe if it's freshly cooked and the stall looks busy. Safety. Vietnam is remarkably safe for tourists. Violent crime against tourists is rare. Petty theft exists, especially bag snatching from motorbikes in tourist areas, so keep belongings secure. The biggest actual danger is traffic, so cross streets carefully and wear a helmet if you ride. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.